Kimberli Wasney, welcome to the show. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thanks for having me.
So you're currently the co-founder of Ripple's Edge Advisors. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so Ripple's Edge, we founded about 2 years ago. So it's my partner and I. Her name's Alexandria Seidel, and she is a former M&A attorney. My background's in business development operations. And we say we help companies grow with the exit in mind. So she was kind of helping companies at the deal table, right? She was an M&A attorney, getting companies that were buying and selling and realizing some of these founders were just, man, if I'd met you 2 years ago, we could have done so much more to get you really ready for this process and get a better outcome valuation, have them feel more comfortable in where they were ending up. And she started working with a couple of them one on one a little earlier in the process, and they very quickly had marketing and sales questions. And she was like, I don't know how to answer that, but I know somebody who does. So she gave me a call and we did one meeting together. And I was like, this is a business. This is what we're meant to do together. So within about 3 months, we had both quit our jobs and here we are. So it's been, yeah, a little over 2 years.
Well, congratulations on those 2 years.
Thank you.
So what were you doing before?
I was head of business development for a corporate gifting company called Packed with Purpose here in Chicago. I was employee number one there, hired to do business development. But when you are employee number one, you wear all the hats, do all the things. So built up the sales team, helped build up the marketing team, and then the operations department as well. So did a lots of building teams, lots of hiring and onboarding and developing processes. And I sort of love those foundational components.
Well, that sounds like a pretty fulfilling job. What prompted you to want to go out and start your own thing?
Part of what I love about what we do at Ripple's Edge is I have the opportunity to do that in lots of different companies. So I love my work at Pact with Purpose. I love my team there and being able to build. But there's like I don't want to say a nosy side of me, but I think that's kind of what it is a need to kind of see how that works in lots of different settings and being able to apply lessons learned to other companies, other industries. We have clients right now that are law firms, we have some in tech, we have some in manufacturing. So being able to say, hey, here's some structures that will work across different applications. There's a little bit of the ADHD brain in there. There's a little bit of a nosy brain in there, but I needed a few more examples and keeps it interesting, keeps my creativity flowing.
Yeah, I really want to dig into some specifics about the services that you all do for your clients. In particular, I bought this company from a gentleman who was retiring and looking to exit his business, and so it's kind of a little relevant to me. So tell me the customer journey. You find these folks that are starting to want to sell their business. What do you do? What's the conversation like?
Yeah, so most of our clients are sort of at one of 2 points in their business journey. We have some that are starting to think about the next chapter. So they're ideally, we say 2 to 3 years before sale. Are they always that far out? No, but that's sort of ideally where they would sit. And they're just starting to explore, what are my options? What are the possibilities for the next life for both the business and for me personally, right? So when we start an engagement with clients, we are always starting with a core values exercise. And we're talking about, where do you see yourself as a person 10 years from now, right? And really trying to get them to visualize what their life looks like. When I wake up in the morning, am I going to work? Am I meeting, am I out doing speaking engagements? Am I sitting on a beach somewhere sipping a Mai Tai? Like whatever those things are that they picture themselves doing. And then what does that mean then for the next phase of the business? Does it mean you need to get the top dollar for it so that you have the capital to do the next thing? Does it mean that, you're very concerned about the legacy and the culture maintaining? So maybe there's a partner that you want to sell to, or a employee that can step into a leadership role? Or is it something like, man, I've been really working with it in this industry. I want to maintain, the strategic components of the business. And then we talk about, okay, are there competitors or strategic partners that might make sense for a buyer? But sort of that core values piece then gets us to, what types of buyers are we exploring, which also means then, what are we looking at in terms of EBITDA, operations, due diligence process, et cetera. So we start very high level. Where do you see yourself? And then that gives us the roadmap to, what are the components then that we need to really, or the levers that we need to start pulling to get you there.
So one of the things you mentioned there, are you also taking them to market?
Oh, yeah, I guess I said we have 2 ways 2 parts of working with people, and I only talked about one. So, yeah, the other one is earlier stage businesses. So we have some of our clients right now, it looks sounds like you are too, entrepreneur through acquisition, where they have recently acquired something and then are trying to figure out how to grow it, right? And build it and get to the next level. So that's where my experience in building business development and marketing comes in. So for some of those clients, we are doing ideal client persona exercises. We're helping them identify what an ideal marketing budget looks like to then meet those clients. And we're even doing some of the strategic work around, okay, now you know who your clients are and what you want to spend to on lead generation and client acquisition. Now let's put together a plan in terms of what conferences are we going to, what channels are we focusing. I don't do the digital marketing implementation, but I can find you somebody in our world that can help with that. So even helping vet and onboard and put in processes.
In the category of the owners that are, more at the retirement stage, what I've found is, that's a very difficult conversation to have, right? So, the owner identity is just really wrapped up in their business, and some of like they can't even comprehend selling the business. Like it's just not something they think will ever happen. Do you find that a lot?
Yeah. And that's why when we say exit, we have a lot of different definitions of exit, right? Because for some of our clients, it does mean selling. For some of our clients, it means being able to step out of the day to day, offboard some of that stress and anxiety of managing the company regularly, and be able to start handing it off to a general manager, to a leadership team that can take on some of that. And then it becomes almost a multi-stage process of letting go of some of that. And you're getting yourself out of the immediate, right? Like, oh my gosh, I have to get this invoice out, or there's a client, something on fire, right? And once you start removing yourself from that process, it becomes easier to start stepping away. So sometimes we say, yeah, maybe exit means selling. Maybe exit means you want to be able to go to Europe for a month and have the company keep running without you while you're gone. Same processes have to be implemented either way, right? It's the same structure, it's the same workflows, but it's the whole journey of getting it just less owner dependent in terms of running the business.
That's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah.
How do you actually get them to do that successfully?
Yeah, we joke a little bit that half of our job is therapy as much as it is actual, consulting and working with clients because it is a very vulnerable place for people that whole identity is wrapped up in being a business owner and building this thing. We one of our earliest clients had owned their trucking company for 35 years by the time that we started working with them and objectively knew that it was time to retire and that he had other, family he wanted to focus on and wanted to be able to have more time at home. But when it actually came to the process of talking to potential buyers, hated all of them, right? Like just could not picture any of them actually running the business, the thing that he built. It was his baby. And so I think tactically, what we understood with him was we had to set realistic expectations about timeline, right? This was not going to be something that we could immediately jump into buyer conversations with. We had to start with some educational components instead, and we did a training with him on this is what the steps of the process look like. And we broke it down into bite-sized pieces where it felt a little less overwhelming. So it's like, okay, let's first start with pulling together your data room. Let's just start gathering information. It gives him time to start feeling a little bit more comfortable with the process. And also through that, we can start highlighting some of those pieces. Hey, I need your P&Ls for the last 3 years. Okay, gives me a moment to look through them, look for any red flags that might come out in the process. And it's also just one more piece in the puzzle as he's sort of building this view of what his next stage look like. So it's a little bit of hand holding, it's a little bit of identifying who needs what kind of touch. Fortunately, there's 2 of us, so I am sort of we'll say, like, the softer, more emotional side of the business. Alex, my business partner, she's very direct. So depending on what kind of communication style they respond to, we know sort of who should take the lead with a particular client.
I'm curious if you're willing to share some specifics in the step of, getting the owner out of the day to day, how you like actually do that. Just a personal example, like I look at every single dollar that comes in or out of here in excruciating detail, and that's just like that's just one example of something that's really hard for an owner to let somebody else take over. So, do
Yeah.
for example, do you implement like a specific operating system? There's a lot of them out there like EOS that are kind of designed to do this, right?
Yeah, so with one of our Colorado-based clients, we did run essentially EOS with her. We add sort of a Ripple's Edge flair to it, of course, but we follow the essential model, right? So I, with her, in order to get her to be able to step out of the business, actually came in with them and facilitated L10 meetings for them, helped with their leadership management. And to your question about how do you get them to, start stepping away and be able to delegate some of the pieces, also helped redefine accountabilities for each person on her leadership team. And we put together a 3, 6, and 9 month process for what decisions was she comfortable handing off in 3 months, what decisions would she be comfortable handing off in 6 months and 9 months, right? So in that first 3-month period, it was pretty tight, right? She still wanted to sort of look at all the spending, all of the dollars that were coming in and out of the business. Everything had to be run through her. Okay, fine. Let's start there and then we'll start widening out. The 6-month stage was like, okay, anything that is for their, for their operations department, right? You have to hand over to your COO hiring and firing control for her team, for their department, right? So, okay, that was the 6-month stage is now you have control within the budget that we've set for your department. You have control over the hiring and the people that are going to be part of that team and the structure. And then the ultimate 9-month plan was that she would also then have control over any spend that needed to happen and being able to work with the CFO to identify a budget for that department. That's how we sort of got her a little bit more comfortable with it, was putting it out in stages so that there were how do I put this? So there were gates in place for us to reevaluate, make sure everyone felt comfortable with it, identify any things that had come up in those past 3 months that maybe you disagreed with, right? Like, let's talk through, I would have done it this way and why I would have done it this way. And then you have some examples for their decision making moving forward, right? And we even built out parameters of, I want decisions based on people first, profit second, and then culture third. Like we put parameters in place for how she liked decisions to be made, which also then, okay, you've defined the process. You know what you want this to look like. Now trust your people. At a certain point, you got to trust.
You mentioned culture there, and I was going to ask a question related to that. How do you think about culture during these transitions? Because, in these small and medium-sized businesses, the culture is often the owner, right? And as they start to step back, how do you handle that?
Yeah. In the workshops that we start with, but then also through the implementation, we always have people reevaluate what their core values are for the business. And then we do personal ones separately, but for the business. And we talk about that in terms of, if you had a leader in your life that you could clone 8 times, and then that business with that leader 8 times would rule the world. This is your ideal company. What are the traits that that person has? And or those 3 people have, right? Like, pick your favorite 3 leaders, and maybe they were very transparent communicators, maybe they were very empathetic leaders, and maybe they were strategic thinkers or high level thinkers, whatever those 3 things are that you think that they did better than anybody else that you've seen. And you take those traits and you start to build out those values, those become then the defining traits that you're hiring off of as well. And I even go so far as to say that's what you build your performance reviews off of too. So when you sit down for your performance reviews for your team and you have your 5 core values identified, are you rating your team not against the roles and responsibilities of their job, but are they meeting the core values that you've identified for the company? And then you know if your team is cohesive in terms of the values that are really important to you, right? If you say, I want everyone on this team to be curious, to be, innovative thinkers, and use it down to do performance reviews, and you've got somebody on your team that never asks a follow-up question, doesn't care the why behind what's happening, you know that they're not the right culture fit. And if you're hiring to that, if you're measuring against that, it becomes more deeply embedded and less one person dependent. So that's why I say, like, embed it into every step of the people process.
That's an interesting way to go about core values that I haven't heard described as you did. I've been through endless core value discovery sessions, but thinking about, who are, just as you said, the top handful of leaders that you think about, and then what are their traits, and then getting at it that way, I think that's a really interesting approach.
Yeah, I also it forces you to think about why they were the best leader for you, right? And what you admired about them. I have had situations where we sat down with somebody and said, "Who was your favorite boss that you ever had and tell me why?" And that part of the process, we had a lighting company in Nevada that we were working with, and I asked that question to the owner of the lighting company, and he was like, "Hey, I had this owner, he was the best guy I ever worked with." Because he was very transparent. I knew everything that was happening with the company, maybe to a fault, right? Like, there's certain owners that are nervous to share the good, the bad, and the ugly about what's happening. But this guy was like, "I felt like I knew everything that was going on, how my role played into that, how my success then helped the success of the company, and exactly then how my success was then incentivized," right? I knew how it aligned with my bonus structure. I knew how it aligned with my future promotion opportunities. And it was just that very clear transparency about all the steps of the process. He's like, "This was the best boss I ever had." And that was the reason. I was like, "Okay, so transparency matters to you. So open communication across departments matters to you." And it just helps us identify those things that are important to the owner.
Yeah, I'm thinking how that flows down through the organization because we all are motivated by different things,
Yeah.
right? So that person likes transparency, somebody else likes security and safety or whatever it is.
Yeah. But to your point about the culture being owner dependent, having it led there and then bringing it to the whole team and say, "How do these feel to the team?" If it's a big company, you're not gonna do it with the whole company, right? If you're a 200-person organization, that doesn't work. But you should be taking it to your leadership team and having them give you feedback on, "You know what? Actually, I think we're missing something around security," or, "I think we're missing something around how we move information down the chain," and letting them fill in those gaps then. Maybe you're asking them similar questions about, "Think about the best leaders you've had. What are we missing here?" And I think then if they're leading their departments that way, that's how you get that sort of whole team buy-in.
I'm going to do that at our next meeting. I'm going to ask people to think about the best leaders they've had and what traits they see in those people.
Yeah, tell me how it goes. I'd love to hear.
So, if you think about the category of your customers that are looking to have a financial exit, whatever that is, and they're 2 to 3 years away from that event, are there some common things that you see in these businesses that need to get fixed?
Yeah, there's 2 that stand out across any industry, any type of business. The first one, and these are the owners that we like to work with, but it's a common challenge across them, is they're still very much in the weeds. They are very hands-on. And that's the first and foremost thing that we have to work on with them is helping them figure out what their zone of genius is and stay there and being able to then offload and delegate to other members of the team. But we've talked about that one a bit. So the second one then that we find is sort of the brand identity being distinct from the owner too. And it sounds like the same, but it's actually very different. So the company, so to give you an example, we had a fitness company that we were working with and we have an exit readiness assessment that we can do with any of our clients, and it goes through it's like 36 questions, and it's kind of it helps you rank things that would be ready for a sale, things that wouldn't be ready, and things that might ultimately kill a deal. One of the questions on there is how strong is your brand? And his response immediately was, "The brand is amazing. We have such good reputation. We're very strong in the everyone knows who we are." And I was like, "Okay, if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, how strong is the brand?" Oh, wait, I'm the one who does all the speaking engagements. I'm the face of the company. I'm the one who does the fitness training. There is no brand without me. That's a problem. We have to then start getting highlights to other faces in the company. How do we get other trainers in front of a camera somewhere? How do we start building up your LinkedIn page for the company separate from the LinkedIn page for you individually? And being able to then start separating some of those things so that the brand is the thing that people are talking about and not the company, right? Like, you don't want somebody to say like, "Oh, I worked with Nick." You want someone to say that they worked with your business, and that's the difference, right? I never want somebody to say, "Oh, Kim was great." I want them to say, "Ripple's Edge Advisors gave me a great experience."
That's interesting. The first one, I expected you to say something along those lines, but the second one I didn't expect, and I want to come back to that. But on the branding being the owner, I totally get it. Like that makes perfect sense. It's just interesting that some of the content that I've consumed recently has really been pushing for founders or owners to lean into them becoming the brand.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think when you're in growth mode, absolutely, that's the place that you should be, right? Like, you're always gonna be the owner is gonna be the best salesperson for the company. 95% of the time, right? You know it best, you have the most passion for it, you have the most direct incentive for it to succeed. I think once we start making that shift to thinking about it being a transferable asset and not just my business, that's when we start having those conversations about what is the brand identity that's not so owner dependent. But up until that point, yes, definitely the owner and the brand are very closely aligned.
I expected your second answer to be that the financials are a mess.
Yeah, but everybody knows that. Yes, financials being a mess will hurt you come due diligence time, and that is why I have a lawyer as a business partner, right? That is the part that, she will wanna look at the financials, the contracts, all of those pieces. We had a company that we worked with very early on, and she was doing, like, in full operation and had not put together an operating agreement yet. And my lawyer business partner, I think, almost freaked out on the call. How are you doing business and you don't have this fundamental thing in place? So I let her handle that side of the house. I like the branding and marketing pieces.
How do you find your clients?
Yeah. So far, with the exception of one, we did one sponsored ad placement with a newsletter that we love the writer of. And then everything else from that has been referrals and word of mouth. Fortunately, we were both I'm Chicago based, my business partner is Denver based. We both had pretty strong networks to start with, so that definitely always helps coming from a role that was business development facing. But yeah, it's all been through partners in our spaces. A lot of CPAs, wealth advisors, and small business attorneys in particular are pretty closely tied to the M&A process and know, especially wealth advisors, they want their clients to sell for as much as they can possibly sell for so that they have money to invest and play with. So they're great partners for us.
You mentioned that paid advertisement. Did that work for you?
It did. Yeah. It was a newsletter specifically for clients in the M&A space. People like business talking about the success stories of small businesses that have sold. And the writer of the newsletter, she does matchmaking for businesses that want to sell with advisors that can help them do that. So it was definitely the target audience was spot on for us.
Clearly, it sounds like you and your co-founder are the key parts of the success of your business. Like you're in there, you're doing the work. How do you scale your business?
Yeah, I was afraid you were gonna ask that question. So we are, a little bit we're 2 years in, so we're a little bit in the do as I say, not as I do quite yet phase. But we are thinking about this for us as well, right? I think for as we think about the future of Ripple's Edge, a lot of what we're thinking about is how do we keep some of the beauty of what we do is really that it's a lawyer brain and an operator brain, right? You have somebody who can speak to from a high level these strategic components, and then you have somebody who's run businesses and can get in the weeds with you, which I love to do. I love getting in the weeds with our clients. So thinking about how we replicate that and then scale and grow ourselves. Where we are going, Alex is very much our external face. She's great at speaking. She is awesome on a stage. She is the quintessential extrovert. And I'm thinking about how do we then bring in specialized consultants so that I have somebody when a client needs, as we do their exit readiness and we identify what those gaps are. If their gap is on their branding, great. I want to have somebody that we can bring into branding. If their gap is their financial house, I want somebody that can do bookkeeping, accounting, and help them get that cleaned up. So I want to break out into specialized consultants for different parts of the process so that it's less dependent on Alex and I being in all the engagements.
So how do you like being a business owner after these first 2 years?
I love it. I said my word of 2024 was freedom, and a lot of what I meant by freedom was this, right? Being able to have the control over my schedule, over what my life looks like. It is even in the most terrifying moments of being a business owner, you are one as well. You understand there's moments that are scary, but it's also incredibly fulfilling. And I get to say, I'm building something. I'm excited about what I'm building. It feels really aligned with who I am and what I like to do. So I am thrilled. My first entrepreneurship adventure was I was 23 and I opened up a volleyball club in New Mexico. And Clearly, there's been an entrepreneurship bug in there ever since, but it took me a little bit to get back to it.
Yeah, certainly the freedom is one of the best things about being a business owner. And you're familiar with the ETA community. And when I give talks in those circles, I always bring up I didn't discover ETA until I was like 40. And it's so powerful. I wish I would have known about it when I was 30, you know.
Yeah. There's a really strong group in Denver that Alex attends pretty frequently, and I love the concept of ETA. I think especially in a time 10 years ago, capital was cheap, everyone could start a tech business, right? Now it's a little bit of a different capital scene. So people are thinking more strategically, and why not buy something that has an established client base and, some established processes and be able to just jump into the fun parts about running a business. And I'm so happy to see people doing it. I think, especially as we see this generational transition, right? Heard so many different names for it. I think my favorite right now is Silver Tsunami. But there's a ton of businesses out there where the owners are aging, the kids don't necessarily want to take it over, or there aren't kids to take it over, and need a new generation of ownership. So I'm excited for it. I think it's great.
Do you see any of the customers or clients that you're working with that are looking to exit, they're at that retirement age. Are any of them, have you seen any of them sell to an ETA process, or are they aware of that as an opportunity to exit?
We're introducing it to a couple of the clients that we're working with right now. We met searchers and tried to do some matchmaking that way and brought them to meet with a couple of our clients to see if there was a fit there. There's one that they're talking right now. I'm not sure which direction it's going to go quite yet, but yeah, that is something that we are trying to include in the process of letting them know what the opportunities are out there. We have a lot of clients who are getting cold calls from PE, and that's not the path that everybody wants to take, right? It's great for some, it's not right for others. So introducing them to I don't know, I'll keep you posted. One of our 2026 goals is to do some sort of workshop seminar on all the different kinds of buyers out there. So I think that's going to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, I do think it's worthwhile educating folks on it, because it's, even though in our community, like, we all know about it, but outside of, our little bubble, it's, I think,
Yeah.
still very much unknown, right? And it sounds a little crazy, right? There's, somebody, an individual that's younger, in their 30s or whatever, walks in and says, "I want to buy your business." It probably sounds crazy initially to these owners.
Yeah, and it's worth remembering too that it's not in everybody's lexicon, right? Like I've been in a few places where I said, "Yeah, we know some searchers we can introduce you." And they're looking at me going, What's a searcher? I have no idea what that is." So, yeah, being able to make bring that to the forefront and let people know it's an option is definitely part of the gig.
I joke around when giving talks on this and say something to the effect of, ETA is just some made up Harvard word for a person buying a business.
Yeah.
So you mentioned just real briefly there about these folks not having kids that want to take over the business. And I certainly have experienced that much more than where there is a kid that wants to take it over, and that's just so surprising to me that, like, those kids don't get it for whatever the reason is. Like, it's just such a gift if you have that available to you as a path to
Yeah.
take over your parents' business. Holy smokes, I think they're just really missing out.
I agree with you. I do wonder because people are working longer, living longer, if the kids are already in their 40s and 50s and just already established in something else, and it feels like too much of a switch to make, and they're not having those conversations earlier, right? If they'd started talking to them maybe around 25, 30, bringing them into the leadership, bringing them into learning about the organization, how things are run, then maybe it would feel a little bit smoother. But yeah, I think if you're 45 and you've been doing something else for 20 years, it just might not seem like the right switch to make, but I hear you. It is sort of a beautiful gift and probably the biggest asset that anybody has typically, so not being able to hand that off to your kids is tough.
It's an interesting thought. How much, if at all, do family dynamics play into your work with clients? Even if people, family aren't working in the business, but people are probably thinking, where, how can I get a paycheck out of this? Or
Yeah, it comes up pretty often. We've got an architecture firm in Texas that we have been talking to, and he is probably the most self-aware about the whole process of any of our clients that we've seen. He's very early. He's probably 8 to 10 years away from selling, which love. The earlier you come talk to me, the better. But he has a son who's 22, 23 maybe, and is getting his degree in architecture. So would feel like a very natural fit. And this owner is saying maybe he'll want it, maybe he won't. So what's my backup plan in case he doesn't? And he's putting together essentially two different pathways. One in case he can hand it off to his son, and one in case he might need to sell to an outside buyer. And I he's the first one where I've been like, wow, you are really proactively thinking ahead and being very honest with yourself about whether or not your kid may want this. Because I think what we typically see is they don't have the conversation early enough, and then the parent is ready to retire, and then bringing it up, and the kid's like, I, I don't know anything about your business. What are you talking about? So if they, as I said, if they talked to them 10 years ago, maybe.
no, you're right. That business owner certainly seems like a unicorn, right? To be thinking that far in advance, because I have not seen that very much,
No,
that type of
no,
planning.
yeah. I would love if all of our clients said, "Hey, I'm 8 to 10 years away. How do I start getting ready?" I we could 5x their multiple, but if you give me 2 years, maybe 1.5x, but yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what I was going to ask, maybe in summary. Give the value proposition for your services to these owners.
Yeah, that is essentially it, right? If you're looking at what your business can sell in your industry, say we're just working with a mental health practice. Average multiples for her kind of business, 4 to 6x EBITDA. I want to make sure that she is positioned to get close to that 6 and not the 4. So what can I do to make you the most attractive to buyers, the most ready for that due diligence process, and the cleanest in-house that is as transferable as possible? So that's really our value prop. There's some research to show that if you work with an advisor, you're increased your valuation at sale by 1.5 times. That's where that 1.5x came from. And that's what I'm trying to do. I want my owners to get as much as possible out of that final sale as they can, and also have the process be as smooth as it can. I don't want it to be a 3-year process that is a nightmare for everybody and somebody walks away from the table at the end. I want it to feel like I know what my expectations are. I feel really good about where the business is going, and I feel good about where my life is now post exit.
And an additional 1.5 times on your EBITDA is real money, right? Even
It's
if you're
real
doing
money.
$1 million of EBITDA, that's real money to leave on the table.
Yeah, I mean, we had one client right now, and we're doing the math. Okay, you're going from 6 million to 9 million. Like this is, as you said, real money.
Well, what a fascinating business. I can see why you're so excited about it and get so much joy, just the diversity of clients that you get to work with. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's because the diversity of clients that we get to work with, it also gives us really interesting, new ideas to bring to our other clients as well, right? Like I may learn something from a tech business that I can now apply to a law firm that neither but one of us would have thought before, but it gives everybody a different perspective.
So remind us, how can folks find you if they want to get more information?
Yeah, they can ripplesedgeadvisors.com is where you can find us most easily. And both Alex and I are pretty active on LinkedIn too. So always love to chat with folks.
Great. Well, what a fun story, Kimberly. Thanks for sharing it.
Thank you for having me.